Well, hello everybody. We're doing a little preview here for our upcoming event on February 29th. For those of you who don't know me, I am Mark Rossetti Jr. I am with the Luzerne County Historical Society. I'm the Director of Operations and Programs. And here with me today, live via the magic of the internet, I have author Lee Woodmansee, and he's going to be our guest speaker on February 29th. And he's also the author of, amongst other things, this book. You're from the Valley. I'm getting a little bit of a glare on it, but we have it on our website. And so basically, if you don't know about the event, it's going to be on Leap Year Day. It's going to be February 29th at the Westmoreland Club in Wilkes-Barre. And it's going to be really cool. It's going to be an overall celebration of this area's culture, heritage, background. So the Westmoreland Club is putting together a ethnic buffet. We're going to have all kinds of food celebrating the ethnic backgrounds of this area. SBC Brewery, which is now the continuation of the Stegmeyer Brewery, they have graciously donated beer for the event. So we're going to have local food, local beer. We're going to have a local man speaking, formerly local man. He's still in Pennsylvania, but he bounces back and forth. We're going to be talking about the book and the heritage behind it. Tickets are $60 if you're a member of the society. They're $70 if you're a non-member. We have, obviously, there's still tickets available. You can contact us directly at the society. You can go on our website, go on our Facebook page, or if you use Eventbrite, tickets are available via Eventbrite. Just go on Eventbrite and punch in Luzerne County Historical Society. We pop right up. You'll be able to get tickets there. But if you want to go, just get a hold of us some way, somehow. We'll get you in. Don't worry about it. I can promise you. But what I thought we would do today is I thought I would just throw a couple of questions here at Lee and just try to give you all a little taste. Maybe you're still on the fence. Maybe you don't know if you want to go. You seem interested in. So we're just going to give you a little taste of what you're going to hear on the 29th. And likewise, if you're already going, this will be a fun little preview. It'll get you kind of in the spirit of the event. So I guess, Lee, the obvious way to start is just give us your background. Where were you born? How long did you live here? What did you do? All that kind of thing.
Well, I was born and raised in northeastern Pennsylvania, in the very northeastern corner on the border of New York, where the Delaware River starts, on a farm. And for the first 17 years of my life, I knew little else other than that farm. And had my neighbors were a lot of my neighbors were actually from the valley. They're part of the migration from the valley to farms when they're able to find farms that they could afford. Wayne County had a lot of farms going up for sale back at the turn of the last century. And so my neighbors, and they had the same cultural ties that the people in the valley did. And the people up there, of course, thought they were pretty funny and unusual because they were different than the standard English background people who, Connecticut settlers settled the area. So I went to college in Kings in '64 and lived there for 17 years until I had to move to York because of work, finding a job. And in York, I started the process. I wrote a book about York, the same type of book, and then said, well, I can do this again. And so I did one on the valley. And I maintained contacts in the valley because my wife is from the valley. Her entire family lives up here in the valley. And and I was amazed by it was great being with her family, and I got a real good feel for what happens and what goes on, and the other activities I was involved in also. And York and Wilkes-Barre are the same in the sense that they both have their own culture and way of doing things. It's just totally different one from the other. So I was really surprised when I moved in college, and I found all these things that were done, the way people said things and did things, the look of the area, so totally different from the farm that I started mentally filing them away. I had no idea why. And I always liked to write. So one day I said, I can do this. So I, down in York at the time, so I wrote a book about York.
Well, okay. So you did talk about that. You wrote a book about York. Do you think outside of York necessarily, maybe outside of the Valley, maybe not you per se, because you wouldn't have the experience, but do you think there's any other areas that would have this kind of microculture that you'd be able to write, somebody would be able to write this type of book about?
I'm sure there are. One of the things that I think happens though is that because of so many people moving around in migration into the area in question, it gets diluted. The way they say things change over time. It becomes more generic. One of the things that people talk about now is how everybody talks the same, uses the same language and same um, words and maybe even curse words. I don't know. But the point is that it gets all whitewashed until it's all very generic. And York and Valley are not that way. And maybe as an example, Pittsburgh, you might be able to do this in Pittsburgh because they have their own way of doing things. Philadelphia sort of does too, although the suburbs are different than Philly itself. But if you hear anything or watch the Phillies or the Eagles, you find that they have a different way of doing things there.
Yeah, that's certainly
not necessarily good, but different.
Yeah, not good, not bad, just different. Wow. Now, you said you came here for college, you stayed here for a number of years. Mm-hmm. What is maybe not necessarily your greatest memory of the area, but what's the one that really sticks out? Like when you're looking back on the time that you stayed here, what's like the first thing that pops in your mind?
Frankly, it's the social events with my wife's family. They had them all the time at various parties, Christmas celebrations, the Vigilia, and great people, both the older ones and the younger ones. And that was a big part of our life, my wife and I, our life, for all the time we lived in Wilkes-Barre. And when we go back, we still see some of the same people who are still alive and haven't moved themselves.
Yeah, that's true. Now, how old were you when you wrote this book, the book on the Valley? And was there necessarily a trigger point? I know you had done the York book first, but was there something that jumped out at you that went, oh yeah, that really can start me on the process?
Well, I was about 55 when I did the York book, and 57 when I did Wilkes-Barre. And the trigger point for me was I was between jobs and looking for something to do. And I always wanted to write. And I got a book about self-publishing. And I said, I can do this. So I not only wrote the book, I published it, I marketed it, did all the press releases, the whole ball of wax that happens around books. But these books sold themselves. I didn't have to push them too hard. It just had to make people aware of them. And they just struck a nerve in both York and Wilkes-Barre.
Yeah, we haven't really had to market them too hard ourselves. Although, shameless plug, if you're interested, we do have them on our website. So if you go to LuzerneHistory.org, go to the gift shop, we do have the books. And like you said, they do sell themselves. Now, speaking of the book, when you go through it, it talks about food, it talks about different traditions, it talks about music, it talks about, the taverns, the churches, politics. What, we don't want to give away everything that's in the book, but what part of it do you think maybe not is the most important, but what part of it do you think is like the largest part of our makeup around here?
Well, the first category I have in the book is culture. And that's the overarching part, which ties everything else together. And the language is part of the culture, becomes what it is because of the culture. I guess the look of the area and the way houses were built, that was also part of the culture, although it was heavily influenced by mining, which of course the culture of Wilkes-Barre and the Valley was changed and created by. Coal mining had a huge influence on it. So I think, but the culture by itself is something I noticed. The culture in the Valley is so different than the culture in New York. It's warmer, friendlier. The people in New York tend to be a little bit more standoffish. They look a little askance at you if you're not a local. And local means you being born there, not just living there. But if you were born there, then you're a Yorker. But the Valley was was always a very warm place. My wife and I would go for a walk. We go out for an hour and get one block done because you had to talk to everybody on their front porch as you went by. And so it was just that warm feeling that we had, and it lent itself so well to the book. And would have been the first one had I been living in Wilkes-Barre when all these other things started. But it just happened to be I was in York, so I did York. It was much easier to market if you're living in the area, which is what I did.
Yeah, that helps. Kind of hard to sell these out in San Francisco or something, I'd imagine.
Yeah,
although there's a lot of
I've
transplants.
shipped them a lot of places.
Yeah, there are a lot of transplants. Now, you mentioned earlier that you wrote it, you published it, you did a lot of the press releases. The book has a really unique art style. I think it's really cool. Did you do the illustrations or did you have someone illustrate it?
I did not, but that's another one of those things that just fell in together. I was working at a township, and they had a summer intern. It was a kid between high school and college. He was going to be an architect. He became an architect. But I was telling him what I was doing, and I was looking for someone to do this and it had to be cheap because I wanted to bring up shoes. And so I told him one of the things about that was going to be in the Europe book. And he just sat down for 5 minutes. He sketched out the drawing. And I said, wow, this is what I'm looking for. I didn't want anything fancy. I wanted the drawing, the artwork itself to be interesting. And he did that very well. And then when by this time he was in college, architecture school, when I came back, he said, do you want to do another book? And he said, sure. In the meantime, every time I printed more books, I set it up so I paid him as the books were printed. We had no idea. And he turned out he did very well that way because I sold so many books. I paid him, I don't know, quarter a book. I can't remember what it was. I kept sending him checks, which I'm sure he appreciated.
Yeah, it's always nice when you go to the mailbox and there's a check in there. Yeah. Well, sticking with the illustrations, we've been advertising the dinner obviously on our website and social media, and then in our in-person events, we've done a few dinners, we've done a few lectures, and obviously we've been carrying the book. And overwhelmingly, everyone loves the cover image of trick-or-treating in a bar. Now, did you know that was going to be the runaway hit? Did you imagine that was going to grab people as much as it did? Or did you, how did that go about becoming the cover image?
Well, I was at one of the family reunions of my wife's family. And this was after the book was mostly written, and I was just trying to get as much more material as I could. And I went to one of her cousins and I said, finish the sentence. You can tell you're from the valley if. And she thought a minute and she said, if you're trick-or-treated in a bar. I go, what? Wait, what? I had never heard of this. And she said, oh yeah, that's where the money was. And right there, it just had such an effect on me. I figured everyone else would have the same effect on them. And I was correct.
It brought back a lot of memories to me because I've trick-or-treated in a bar. So at least until the early 90s, 93, 94, that area, it was still a thing. And yeah, that was where the money was. So you'd want to hit a couple of them on your route and then you'd go away. So that was very
oddly, I would think that local bars really have a big part in the valley. All these, the number of local bars are just amazing. Every corner has one, and they're all local bars. It's not like you have to worry about who's going to be in the bars. You know everybody in the bar that night.
Yeah,
and they're very friendly places. That's why kids were allowed, and the parents didn't mind if they trick-or-treated in the bar.
Now, obviously, the overwhelming response to the book, everything I've heard, not just when doing this event, but in the past after it was published and everything I've ever heard is it's overwhelmingly positive. I mean, you put it out somewhere on a table or whatever, everybody wants to flip through it, everybody's laughing. Did you receive any negative feedback for this? Was there anybody that was kind of like, hey, you're taking shots at where we live, or did everybody kind of get what you were trying to do?
I don't think I got one negative feedback from the Valley. I got a few from York, and that's because I was doing a radio interview, and the gentleman on the radio who was interviewing me started riffing on some of the things, and it got into the area of where he was sort of making fun of some people. He got some calls about that. But I did not have one negative comment about the Valley book.
Good. There shouldn't be any. It's hysterical. Now, when you were doing, you printed them, you've done press, you've done other events, you've distributed the book. Have you ever run into somebody and they're like, "Hey, you're from the Valley," when, and they hit you with one and you went, "Oh, that was really good." Like, have you heard any really good ones that later on?
I have, and I can't think of any from the Valley, but what happened in New York was that people did just that. And matter of fact, in the back of that book, I had a little thing you could write on and send it back to me with your ideas of what I missed. And I got so many, I did a second book. It wasn't as good as the first book, but I got the chance to do a second book. I had another autograph signing. We invited all the people who were co-authors, you might say, and kickstarted the second book off down here. But I didn't get as many comments from the Valley as I did from York, for whatever reason. But the other thing was that at that time I was actually had started my own business in telecommunications. I didn't really have the time to devote to doing another book. I was really working all the time.
Yeah, I think we can all relate to that one. Again, this is Lee Woodmansee. He's the author of You're from the Valley. It's a great book. We have it available on our website. It's on Amazon. It's on a bunch of different places. Likewise, we are doing a dinner with this on February 29th on Leap Year Day, because it is a leap year this year. Every presidential election year is a leap year. And it's going to be at the Westmoreland Club, 6 o'clock, $60 for members of the society, $70 for non-members. We're going to have a nice buffet of different ethnic foods. We're going to have beer provided by SBC. Lee is going to be speaking. It's going to be a night of celebration of the culture of the Valley and really what makes us unique. So hopefully you'll come out and see us again. Lee, this was great. Thank you for your time. And
Sure.
I'm really looking forward to the dinner myself, and I'm sure our members are too.
Well, I am too. I didn't expect this came out of the blue. I didn't expect it, but I'm really looking forward to it.
Excellent. And hey, we'll see you then.
Good. Thanks.